Hey there, it's Wednesday, and that means another Ask Me Anything session where I'm responding to your questions about book publishing and writing a better manuscript. Keep the questions coming because I'm really enjoying doing these sessions and being able to speak more directly to some of the concerns that you have. Let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And also, I have a freebie in the description below for anyone who's working on a current manuscript. It is called my free story self-assessment. It is a worksheet that's going to help you pinpoint the strengths and weaknesses in your draft. And the best part is, it is going to sign you up for my newsletter where I give exclusive tips and insights that you won't find on my channel. We have great questions today, so without further ado, let's dive in. The first question is, if a top agent rejects my query, is it likely other top agents will do the same? In short, not necessarily. The publishing business is an inherently subjective one, right? And agents are ultimately looking for a story that really resonates with them, a story they think they can sell, which often depends on their personal relationships with editors at publishing houses because it is a network-driven industry. So just because one agent didn't necessarily connect with your story or doesn't necessarily feel they have the connections to sell it, does absolutely not mean that another agent isn't going to feel differently. That's why it's important to typically query a few dozen agents, because it's impossible for you to know for sure whose taste is exactly going to align with yours. Even if the agent says they represent your genre, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to connect with your specific story. That is much harder to predict and know. So do your research on agents and do your best to try to find agents who suit your specific story. Search the deals that they've done in the past and see if they work with authors who are similar in style or content to you. But don't let a rejection from one agent who you thought was a really good fit let you down. When it comes to querying, it really is about casting your net wide and finding that one that will bite. That said, if you have queried several dozen agents and are only getting rejections, or if you are getting constructive feedback about your materials, then it could be a good idea to take a moment to iterate on either your query letter, your synopsis, and or your manuscript itself. Remember that that's something you can do at any point in the querying process. You won't be able to re-query the agents you have already reached out to, but you can now reach out to new agents with your refreshed materials and see if maybe you get a positive response that way. You want to make sure that your query materials are working for you, not against you. Here's another querying related question. I have been working on a book. I thought it was good enough for agents and sent it out. Most agents did not respond. I started to rewrite the short length maybe one issue. Started at the main character's childhood, which does still advance story. Found out many agents are not looking at queries if don't have a guaranteed amount of interest sales. Discouraged to do the extra work without knowing that agents will look at the query. This is a story that needs to be published, but I can't write a good query. I don't know how to describe the story because, like Wizard of Oz has different meaning if you're a child or an adult watching, my story has many different aspects. I need some help getting to the next level. But a writing retreat is not an option at this time, and there are no longer any writing clubs in my area. What other low or no cost options do I have? Okay, so it sounds like you're in the position of wanting feedback on your manuscript and or your query materials, but you don't really have a built-in writing community at this time and you're not sure where to go. There are several things you can do. You mentioned that there aren't writing groups in your local area, but there are so many writing communities online. Facebook groups, Discord groups now. There are many places where writers are gathering and discussing both the craft of writing and the publishing process online. I know that there is a thread on Reddit called Pub Tips where people post their queries and then other writers, or even in some cases publishing professionals, hop in and provide actual editorial suggestions on their query letters. So those are all places to check out to connect with writers and hopefully get some constructive feedback. But because you also reference not being confident in your ability to write an effective query letter, I would also encourage you to dive into more resources online. My channel has quite a few on how to write effective queries. There are a lot of literary agents, traditionally published authors, and editors at publishing houses active on Twitter, and they often create threads with tips on how to write a good query letter. Also, doing a simple Google search for writing a query letter is going to give you some helpful resources and even templates that you can then use to craft your query. I have a video breaking down paragraph by paragraph what your query letter should include, so I'm gonna add that in the description below as a resource as well. Here's a question. I write quite broadly, from middle grade to adult, from speculative fiction to literary fiction. I've come to terms with the fact that one agent might not be interested in all of my work, and I may end up needing more than one agent, or maybe even self-publishing the stories my future agent isn't interested in or passionate about. My question is, do we know the general popularity of markets and genres in the self-published arena versus traditionally published? For instance, I know that traditionally published YA is extremely popular, but I'm not sure I can even think of a self-published YA novel off the top of my head. But on the other hand, romance has always been a cornerstone of traditional publishing and has absolutely exploded with the advent of self-publishing. My concern is that if my agent is interested in, say, my adult speculative fiction and I resort to self-publishing my YA and middle grade fiction, I may be shooting myself in the foot if there isn't much of a market for young readers in the self-publishing space. This is a complex question, but an interesting and important one. It's not so easy to say that this genre is better for traditional publishing and this genre is better for self-publishing and just have a cut and dry list. That would be too easy, right? The fact is that there are certain genres that are really proliferating in the self-published space, and there are genres that are tried and true that traditional publishers are always looking for. And I think maybe many of the genres fall into the category of both. They can be traditionally published and self-published and find readers in both arenas. So for you, what I would recommend doing is thinking about the library of books that you have written or intend to write, and think about what has the broadest reader potential. What is going to appeal to the widest possible audience? That is most likely going to be the story that literary agents and publishers are going to be most interested in, whether that is a romance or a speculative fiction novel. I would say think less about genre, think more about the potential of the audience. Is this the type of story that's going to resonate with a lot of different readers across different demographics? Or is this a story that really only a specific niche or type of reader is going to be interested in? If it feels more niche, it is likely going to be more suited to self-publishing. And that's why you see many of the genres that are very popular in the self-publishing space are more niche. Specific types of erotica, for instance, can be very popular in the self-publishing space because there is an appetite for a specific type of reader and they know exactly where to find that. If your story is appealing to a general readership and has that commercial angle, then I would go with that for traditional publishing. That said, remember that writing and publishing are both arts and not sciences, so there's really not one clear-cut path for you, which I hope also feels a little bit freeing as well. Here's another question. I'm a first-time querier and I hear mixed messages about following up on a query. Is it acceptable to follow up or nudge an agent when it's been 6 months or more? I have some queries that are a few months old, some approaching a year, and I'm not sure if I should mark them as a no response or follow up with them. I don't want to come across as rude. What I would do in this situation is first check the agent's website and see if they gave you a specific time frame in which they would respond to your query. Some agents put language on their submissions page that says, if we haven't responded in 6 months, consider it a rejection, in which case you don't need to follow up, and unfortunately, you should consider that a pass. If they don't specify that, then what I would do is check the specific agent's Twitter profile, because I've been seeing more and more agents these days post updates about their status of their queries on Twitter. They'll say something like, I should have responded to all queries. If I have not, please send me a nudge. So in that case, if you haven't gotten a response, perhaps your query got lost and it is appropriate to nudge the agent. If they don't say anything like that and don't give an update on their Twitter page, and their agency website doesn't specify a certain time frame and gives you the impression that they are going to give you a response of some kind, then definitely go ahead and send one nudge. Literary agents typically aren't offended if you give them a quick follow-up. I'm not gonna say it guarantees that you get a response. You may not get a response from that follow-up, but at least you tried, and an agent isn't going to be upset about you giving them a nudge, especially if you've waited at least 6 months. Those are the questions we had time for today. If you have any questions that you want me to answer in a future video, please leave them in the comments thread here. This is the queue that I go through when I am answering the questions, and I would love to hear what you are wondering about. As always, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget your free story self-assessment waiting for you in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.